Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hey, it's Zoe. Welcome to the show. Today on Planet Human. The Economic Policy Institute did a review of CEO and worker pay between 1978 and 2021. You might have heard some of these stats already. It's worth repeating them. CEO compensation grew 1,460%. That's 1,460% over that period of time. A typical worker, their compensation grew by 18.1%. So 1,400 versus 18. And CEOs make 399 times more than the typical worker. Something has got to shift because there's nothing like inequality to bring on revolution. So, what are you doing about that is the question. Meantime, on Planet Zoe, well, I am in the throes of finishing the first draft of Olympus Bound, which is the sequel to the Olympus Project. And it has been so much fun. I've upgraded how I approach the writing by using ChatGPT and pseudo-write, these AI tools to help me iterate, develop ideas, brainstorm, and produce text more quickly. I still spend a lot of time shaping the language and the story so that it's in my voice and it's producing the kind of quality writing that I enjoy. So that's really fun happening on Planet Zoe. My question for you today is, how would you like to be 20% faster and more effective in your job? Yeah. So that my CEO can make 1,400% more money than me? Just kidding. Of course, you want to be 20% faster. So the idea is you can get through your work and get away from work faster and have more downtime. That's one of the benefits. Well, my guest today is Jonathan Green. He is remarkable. He's a celebrity ghostwriter. He's the author of ChatGPT for Profits, Serve No Master, and 300 other books. 300. Yeah. Amazing. And we dive into the nitty-gritty of his most recent book, ChatGPT for Profits, which has applications beyond entrepreneurship to general business practice to life practice. And it was a delight. So I learned a lot from the book and I learned a lot from the conversation. So let's dig in. Well, all the way from a tropical island on the equator, welcome to the show, Jonathan Green.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and I know we're going to have an amazing discussion.
Oh, we totally will, because we're talking about one of my favorite topics at the moment, and I'm digging right into it, and it's ChatGPT and leadership. But first of all, rewind a little bit. So one of the other interesting facts about you, which I was drilling you on before we got on the call, you've written 300 books, you live on a tropical island. How did you get to here and now doing all that? And basically your backstory, please.
Sure. So the writing came about by accident. I always wanted to be a writer, but never thought I could, because you kind of never get that encouragement in school. They're like, oh, you know what, Jonathan, you could be an amazing writer. Like I never heard that. And I never really thought of author as a profession. So I had a blog in my late 20s about my dating life.
Really?
And I would just write about all my misadventures. Yeah. And I didn't know other people could find your blog. So I wrote like a diary. So I wrote really personal stuff about how all my misadventures, like the weirdest stuff would happen to me. Like one time I said hi to a girl and she started crying and ran out of the bar. And I was like, what happened? Because I was like, that probably wasn't about me, because I only said hi, but I don't know. Or one time I was trying to kiss a girl and I go, I think we should kiss now. And a bird pooped on her right as I said that. And I was like, I don't think there's any way to save this. Like, I don't think you can, because it's such a thing. And I was like, I feel like this has only ever happened to one person once, me. So crazy stuff always happens to me that's like really funny if it's not you. And I would write, and then one day I looked and my blog was really, really famous. When I added in Google Analytics, I was like, I'm getting 100 visitors a day for a blog I thought no one knew about. Was like shocking to me. And then I was at the top of the Google charts for get a girlfriend, because that's what I was trying to do. 3 years of no success. But my stories were so crazy and really funny. And a publishing company in direct response called me. They called me on the phone and said, hey, would you be interested in writing a book for us? And I knew their last book had sold millions of copies, and they charge $67 for their books. They've done millions and millions and millions of dollars. I was like, yeah, of course. Why would I say no to that? I'm not making money from this blog. I'm writing about it. I wrote this book called Girl Gets Ring, which was about how women can get their boyfriends to propose. So I wrote from all my experience working with men all around the world, because I eventually had met hundreds of men and taught men about dating stuff along my journey and my journey. So I wrote a book for women, kind of showing what men are really thinking and how to communicate with men. And that just, it still sells. It sold like 100,000 copies the first year and just kind of went gangbusters for us. And I discovered this whole world of where you sell a book directly to a person instead of through a bookstore. And so that's where I wrote a lot of books for clients and people over the next 4 or 5 years on all these different topics. And then one of my clients at one point was like, he didn't release it. I wrote this book on potty training your kid because I potty trained my first 3 children, and nobody ever wants to learn from dad. They always want to learn potty training from the mom. So every potty training book is always written by a woman. So that was my first time I used a pen name. And that was the #1 book on potty training for a year. If I'd known how hard that category was supposed to be, I would have never put that on Amazon. But I wrote the book. He never published. I go, let me just put it on Amazon. I'll change enough that it's not the same. And that kind of opened up the world to me of writing more books under my own name. So I write under 4 or 5 pen names and my own name. So I have like a romance name. I have my parenting name, which also does like decluttering. Like my book on decluttering was the #1 book on hoarding for a while. So these kind of crazy things happen when you start to like dabble in regular bookstores. And just along the way, I've written a lot of books for clients. I take on now 3, maybe 4 ghostwriting clients a year and some book coaching clients, because I can't stop myself. Last year, I said, I'm not doing any more ghostwriting. And then my partner, Debbie, who's my part of my AI training courses, was like, how come you're blogging so much suddenly? And I realized, like, if I'm not writing for clients, I'm just going to blog for myself. So now I take on 2 or 3 clients a year again. I was like, I can't stop myself from writing because it's what I love to do.
That is so awesome. Well, as a writer myself, and somebody who is nowhere near as prolific as you, I'm intrigued by A, your success, and B, your process. And you mentioned before we hit record that you dictate. So has that always been your process, is to dictate your books?
No, most of my first books I wrote by hand, typing on a keyboard, and then I have vision problems. So my vision started to fade. Like I sometimes go blind for like 6 hours or a day at a time.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, I need to be able to take care of my family, even if my vision goes away. So fortunately, like I haven't had a big incident in a few years, but you never know when it's going to come back. So I still have problems in my eyes. I still have to use custom computer monitors, and I use tons of e-ink stuff because of my vision problems. So it's always there. It doesn't go away. I just haven't had a full blindness in a while. So I realized I was like, I have to learn how to dictate. And I went through a lot of like pain. It was really hard because all of the processes, like most of the transcription software about 5 or 6 years ago was terrible. Even the best ones are like, oh, we have a 95% accuracy rate. But that means there's a mistake every sentence. Every 20 words, one of them is wrong. That's a lot of mistakes. And I tried some of the most expensive tools. I tried all these different things. I used to have 2 full-time transcriptionist people on my team. Fortunately, now the transcription AI software has gotten good enough that it's got a really high accuracy rate with me. And for a long time, I had an editor who worked with me full-time. Now she's gone on to do some really bigger and better things, and she's moved past editing. She's like growing, which is awesome. But I would just dictate a book and she would clean up the transcription and edit it all in one pass. And so then I only have to do 1 pass on the computer at it. So one of the things for me is that I will never do more than 2 passes on a book. So once I write it, I'll do 1 rewrite where I'm just adding in all the things that are missing and 1 final edit to clean up all the mistakes. And now the editing part, an AI can do for me. So ChatGPT edited my last book for me. So I just have to read it while it's editing. And that allows me to spend less time on the screen.
That's amazing. What transcription service are you using right now?
I've always been a big fan of Descript. I think they have added in all of these crazy features. So now you can like edit videos via text. So when I started using it, it was just a good transcription tool. And that's what I've been with for a really long time now. They have just the best pricing model and their tools are really powerful. They're constantly adding new features, like way beyond what I thought they would do. And the result I get is really solid.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. So fast forward to AI, and you mentioned that you're using AI to help, and ChatGPT to help edit. How did you get interested in AI stuff?
I started seeing a ton of videos about AI across my YouTube and social media feeds around January of this year. And I was like, this is getting pretty serious what's happening here. And I realized I watched a bunch of videos. I noticed that I was like, this is going to get ubiquitous. This is going to be AIs everywhere. And as we've seen since then, right, every single company, every day there's a new announcement of a new company that's adding AI to something. So I got in, not at the beginning of the wave, but at the beginning of this wave, right? Where it's like really hot now. And I watch a lot of these videos and I'm always thinking I can write a better prompt than this. I can fix this. I can improve this. I constantly see all of these trainings and other books everywhere that teach about AI, but they're always theoretical. Most of the content that you see about AI is either really technical, like, oh, look at this new white paper, look at this new model. Here's how the technical of AI works. Or it's like, I made one AI thing and made $5 million, right? Or it's like kind of those two ends of the spectrum. It's like really fake, or like, this is a cool thing to do. Like I was just watching another training about text to video, but it always looks terrible, right? It always looks seizure inducing. It's not actually usable. So I think that the most important part for me is the practicality. So that's what I focus on in my book. And that's what I think is really important, is to see it as a tool. Like, I don't know how a calculator works. I couldn't open a calculator and fix it. And I don't know how AI works. I don't know how my TV works, but I know how to use it effectively. So I really see AI as a tool. And I try in a lot of different areas. I try to see, always push the limits. Can it do this? Can it do that? I want to find the wall of what it can and cannot do. And that's really kind of what I'm pursuing, is seeing, is there a limit? Or is there just more and more it can do? Because it's constantly being upgraded. There's constantly new features. So it's becoming a more and more powerful tool that can really help people in any part of their business.
I love it. So the book that you're talking about is ChatGPT for Profits, which I've read and it was awesome. And I downloaded your prompts, which are straight from the book, because I'm reading this and going, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. And you're like, here you go. Here's a summary of all the prompts. I'm like, yes, you just saved me from having to highlight, copy paste, which is awesome. Tell me who you had in mind as the audience for this book.
I'm thinking about two types of people, like early entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out, like I was way back in 2010. And the second type of person is the person who has a full-time job and isn't paying attention. I have a feeling that in about 2 years, when you apply for a job, one of the first questions they're going to ask is, what's your level of skill with AI? Because in the same way, if you hire an accountant and the accountant goes, I don't use calculators, you're like, wait, what? That same thought is how we're going to see people that don't know how to use AI, because it just makes you faster. AI isn't a replacement for someone. It's a way to make them faster. I can do about 5 days of work in 4 days. I'm 20% faster, more efficient. So would you rather have an employee that can do 100 tasks a week, or an employee that can do 120 or 130? So that acceleration makes a difference. And I feel that it's not really optional, because it's going to become such a widespread tool that people really need to learn to use it. So I think it's very important for people that want to stay in a career, which is totally fine. They can't let this one slip past them, because it's not going to be optional. And I think that the other people, someone who's starting as an entrepreneur like me, there's so many things that you aren't good at that you need to hire someone. So every task, like you're hiring someone on Fiverr to do like a small task, like write me a small sales page, or write me a Facebook ad, or design a book cover, all of these things that we used to pay for. Now you can do them faster. Like one of the great struggles, as I'm sure you've done in your career, is whenever you hire someone to like make a logo for you, a graphic, every time you want revisions, like after a couple of revisions, they're annoyed. Like their feelings are, and you're like, okay, I'll just take the last one. I'll just take the last logo because I don't want to fight anymore. And so you have a logo you kind of like, but that's perfect. Whereas when you're using AI tool, you remove that like possibility of hurting the AI's feelings, because you can ask for 50 revisions, 100 revisions, and it doesn't matter. Like you can ask ChatGPT the same question 1,000 times. It never hurts its feelings. So it removes that kind of social pressure to accept something that's not quite perfect. And it allows you to be faster, to get things done, to go outside of your skill set, and to do things without spending a lot of money, because a lot of people starting business don't have a large budget. Like if I want to translate one of my books, it's $10,000 to $20,000. That's a huge expense. And maybe no one's going to like it in French, right? You don't know. So it's a huge risk. Whereas now I can translate one of my books into another language, and it's very good. As I show in the book, it's good at self-correcting. Like I translate, like the test I always use is I'll translate something into Japanese in Google Translate and translate it back. If it sounds different, then I know the translation's not there yet. And now with ChatGPT, it's the same. I haven't experienced that before. Like the translation back is very, very accurate, which shows that like the potential is there to access new languages, to access all of these different things that before you'd have to spend forever learning how to do. So it just gives you these like powers to try different things without having to spend hours or hundreds of hours learning each new skill.
Yeah, it is incredible. So the examples you give in the book are amazing in terms of where to start and the answers that can be generated. Let's talk specifically about how ChatGPT can help the second audience that you mentioned there, executives who are not yet paying attention, who will hopefully be paying attention after this podcast, about how to use these actual tools. So I'm thinking about leaders, senior executives, CEOs. What specifically can they use ChatGPT to help them be more productive and strategic?
The first and like easiest use case is Summarise. Like whenever a new video comes out, like, hey, there's 10 new announcements on ChatGPT this week. It's a 25-minute video. I throw it into ChatGPT and I can read the answer because it bullet points and it makes amazing notes. It's one of the best note takers in the world. And I can read it all in less than a minute. So it saves a massive amount of time. One of the biggest challenges is there's so much people want you to know. Oh, you have to watch this video and that video and see this performance and see what this person's talking about. And it's a lot to keep up with. Or all of these pieces of content are like all the reports that come in about all of your employees. But now the ability to summarize those into the most important parts is really helpful for efficiency. It lets you go through tasks faster. It helps you to handle email tasks faster. And because it's good at sorting and starting to understand you, so you can write emails with the help of an AI because it knows how you write. You can train it on your style. That allows you to do those things faster. And as far as leadership, what it can help you do, which is very interesting, and it's one of the things I show in the book, is it can help you with coaching areas. So you'd say, oh, I have an employee who has this problem. I talk in the book about, I had a client who would not stop rewriting chapter 3 for 6 months. Every single week I'd say, don't work on that. And I couldn't break through. I felt it was a failure on my part. And I knew he was going to quit because I would too if I couldn't get stuck. And I was like, would you please stop? He's like, just one more week. I'm like, please don't do it. And actually, I asked ChatGPT about it. It gave me really good advice of some things I wish I'd tried, because I couldn't figure out this problem. And it's my fault as the coach, right? To help someone stop doing a thing that's not working. And that scenario can help you as well. You can go, oh, I'm having a client who has these 2 problems. What are some choices? Like I've asked a lot of questions about conflict resolution, which is very interesting to me. And it will often come up with a lot of different perspectives. I asked it a lot about emotional intelligence, right? A lot of people are interested in that, or disc profile. So all these things that can be a lot to learn. Like let's say, I know some companies that make every single employee take a disc profile, right? Well, now you can say, hey, this is this person's disc profile. Give me highlights of how to talk to them. And it will give you a really shorthand. So what it does is it kind of expands your knowledge, because when you're leading a large team, it's very hard. Like when my company got above a certain size, I had to start hiring managers, right? Once I went past 7 employees, you need someone to manage the 7. And I had about 20 for a while. And it was very hard to keep up with everyone. So you have to hire middle management. And it's like, how can I keep up with what every person's doing? This person's oversight of that person. So AI tools can allow you to add in a lot of automation, a lot of tracking. So it can basically, every time someone sends in a report, you can have an AI tool summarize it and add it to another thing. And then a second thing, go through it, everything, and prioritize which ones you need to go through first, so that you'll catch like problems faster. And another way it can help you is like with contracts and paperwork. You know, my family's mostly lawyers, except for me. Everyone's a lawyer. My father's a lawyer. My sister's a lawyer. My sister's husband's a lawyer. And oftentimes in contracts, there's little things that you miss. Whereas ChatGPT goes through and it doesn't get bored. So you can say, hey, is there anything weird in this contract? And it's the same for like crypto, smart contracts, those things. You can go, hey, is there anything weird in here? And it will catch it. Or what are the things that are most important from this? So it can actually help you to catch things in documents and in negotiations that might have slipped through the cracks. So it gives you this edge. Because, you know, sometimes they slip that thing in the very bottom or in a footnote. ChatGPT doesn't care because it weights all the content equally. So it helps you to catch those things.
That's awesome, Jonathan. A very quick technical clarification for me. So the first thing you said is summarize. And you said you can throw a YouTube link. Is that exactly what you do? You just throw the link into ChatGPT and say, please summarize? Is there a plugin that you use?
You can do that now. You can just give it the link. And one of the plugins does that. But what I do is actually, YouTube has now started providing a transcript for every single video. So I just copy the transcript from the side of the video. So that YouTube's added their own AI that's doing that. They're also working on a new AI that will automatically add new languages. So they're trying to do auto translations. That's something they just announced this week. But I can just copy the transcript and paste it and say, this is a transcript, please summarize. That's how I normally do that. Because you can give it the video, but it's slower because it has to watch the video and transcribe it itself. So I just make it a little bit faster.
All right. And if, for example, you said go through the contract, do you upload the document or copy and paste the document? How does that work?
There's several ways to do it. There's a plugin now called Chat with PDF, which is one of the plugins that just came out recently. And you upload the PDF, or you can give it a link to the PDF like in a Google Doc, and then it will just go through it. And that's one of the best ways to do it. So even if you have a really long contract, you can actually ask the contract questions and do kind of, because some contracts are like hundreds of pages. So you can have it approach it that way. Say, hey, can you tell me what this means? Or what does this mean? And it will help you to start to do it that way. So you can be like a chat, like you have a conversation with it, or you can have it kind of point out things that it thinks are weird or points you need to watch out for.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate it. As I was reading through your book, one of the things I noticed that you've worked out is that there seems to be a logic tree that is the best way to approach interrogating or using ChatGPT for problem solving or for iterating, etc. How do you see that? Is there a logic tree that you've developed that you're consciously aware of to apply to ChatGPT?
So there are some things in ChatGPT that are really, really far beyond what I cover in the book as far as really advanced skill chains and logic trees. So like, and I'm just aware of them, but I haven't mastered them because it's really, really complicated and it's very theoretical. But what I try to do is create guide rails. I want to limit ChatGPT to an area of expertise that's useful to me right now. So when I want it to sound like me, I create a prompt that makes it act like me and use its knowledge because it's read my book. Say, oh, use that style to know who I am and write in this style. And in the same way, you can create these rails. So if I want to learn physics, I want ChatGPT to only use the part of its database that covers knowledge from physicists. Because the problem with ChatGPT is too much information. So if you imagine you have the algorithm has read every single book that ever exists, most of those books are bad. Most books don't become bestsellers. Most books never get a review. There's millions and millions of books that are bad. ChatGPT can't tell a good book from a bad book. So if you say, write like a writer, and there's 100,000 bad books and 1,000 good books, well, it's going to weight the bad books bad because there's more. So if I limit it and say, oh, write like this author, it immediately says, oh, I'll just use this database of these books. And now it limits it to a good data set, depending upon which author you like. I can say, just write like Isaac Asimov. He's a great example because he wrote hundreds of books, large amount of information by one science fiction author. Now I have a pretty good data set to work from, as opposed to if they only wrote one book, it's not a lot to pull from, right? It's a limited data set. So a medium-sized data set's really good, and it will only pull from a good author. So if I say, oh, only use information from this physicist or this person, it limits the data and it comes out in a different style, and it allows me to push out. I'm not really trying to keep in the good. I'm trying to push out the bad because there's just so much information. Like if you read every single website, most websites are bad. It's just the way it is. There's so much content out there. How many people have tried a website for 10 minutes, didn't go anywhere, but ChatGPT still read it. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of separate out the stuff that's irrelevant or not useful.
Yeah. You talk a little bit about that in the book as putting the lens of context across the thing that you want to look at. I thought that was so incredibly helpful. And the example you give is one of the mistakes. I'll ask you about more mistakes in a second, is asking really vague, open questions like, help me plan a trip to Italy. And it's like, there's so many things that go into that. So can you tell me about how you revamped that prompt and made it a better prompt?
Yeah, when I saw that, I forgot about when I saw that prompt, it made me so mad because it's so unuseful. Imagine if you asked me about a trip and I don't know who you're going with, what's your budget, how many people in your family, are you going alone, you're going with friends. I travel right now. When I'm going on vacation next week with my wife and 4 children, it's completely different than when I travel by myself. It's like driving a train. Everything is logistics. It's so different. We're talking about how much luggage can we bring? We have to pay per bag, all of this stuff. It's completely different, our thoughts and stuff. So the most important thing, and this is really the game changer, is that you can avoid asking bad prompts by starting with a question saying, ChatGPT, what information do you need to help me plan a good trip to Italy? As soon as you switch to that, you remove the possibility of asking a bad question, because if you ask a bad question, ChatGPT will never tell you. It will never say that's a dumb question, because it's designed to always seek affirmation. It will always try and give you what you want. But as soon as it will say, oh, here's what I need to know. And whenever it does that, it's usually things I didn't think of, because it will say, how many people in your group? What's your daily budget? How are you traveling? What type of things do you like to do? Because everyone travels different. Like some people like to travel in a large group. Some people like to go to all of the like museums and things. I've been with friends who go on trips like that. I'm like, this is a lot of walking. We're walking through every single museum, seeing everything. That's not what I love to do. But everyone travels differently. So if it doesn't know what you like, it's going to give you all the wrong recommendations. If it doesn't know your budget, it might tell you to go to places that are just really expensive and it's not useful to you. Because when you're backpacking, your budget's $15 a day. It's very different than someone whose budget is $10,000 a day. Completely different trip. You can both have a good time. So by switching to saying, ChatGPT, what information do you need to help me with this problem? It will always give you like amazing guidance. That's really the solution to any problem you're facing with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I thought that was just absolutely brilliant. So I applied that. I tried it in a number of different things. So I'm running a webinar for one of my CEO group coming up, and I wanted to talk about ChatGPT productivity for CEOs. And I said, well, let's do a little experiment. Help me plan my time over the next 3 days was the problem I was asking ChatGPT. And I took your advice and I put in there, what kinds of information do you need from me to help you plan the 3 days with me? And it gave me a long list of things. I'm like, okay, great. So I just replied to all of that, and then we iterated. So I think that's the other aspect of it. So ChatGPT came back with a bunch of recommendations how I could plan out the 3 days. And then we had to fine tune it. And I think that's the next part of using ChatGPT well, is like digging into or drilling down. How do you approach the post first prompt reply?
Yeah, I'm always trying to give it more information. So sometimes it will give you something that's not useful. And one of the examples is like when I'm asking it for recipes, I have to tell it which ingredients we have access to and don't have access to because of where I live. And that completely changed the response. And sometimes it will give something, I go, oh, I don't want that. That sounds gross. Or I don't want to eat that. Or I don't like that exercise. Like I hate lunges. When I'm doing that exercise, I don't want to do lunges. I'm like, give me anything else to avoid doing a lunge. So it allows you to refine. And that's kind of a simplified version, but it might give you a schedule and you go, oh, this won't work for this reason, right? Like, oh, actually there's something needs modified. And usually it's because we didn't give it enough information, right? We didn't mention, oh, I actually have a meeting at this time tomorrow or something like that. So if you remember, it's in the name, it's ChatGPT. It's conversational. You can say, oh, you know what? I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I want to do this instead, or let's modify that. And the beauty is that it's conversational and that it can never hurt its feelings. So you never have to worry about kind of that happening. Whereas if someone plans a day for you and you give them feedback, you might hurt their feelings. It removes, I think that's one of the coolest things that it removes, is the kind of social pressure for you to kind of protect someone's feelings, because now you're just talking to a robot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is one of the most useful things. And going back to what you said earlier about using it as a coach, I think is really, really powerful as well, because you can keep interrogating, resist the coaching that it's giving, and it diffuses all the emotional games, as you say, in the conversation that can be there when you're working with another live human. So what are some mistakes that people can make once they start on their exploring ChatGPT journey?
A lot of people don't understand how it works because there's so many news stories that are saying, oh, it can do this and can do that. The biggest mistake you can make is putting your thumb on the scale. You never want to tell ChatGPT the answer you're looking for if you're doing any kind of research. So recently a lawyer got into a lot of trouble because he said, hey, ChatGPT, find me 10 cases that proves this. Because the way ChatGPT is programmed, it will never tell you, I can't find that. It will always lie to you because that's how it's designed, to seek positive affirmation and think one answer at a time. Instead, if you ask, hey, are there any cases that would be relevant to this? You're more likely to get a better answer. But even better is when you're asking questions where there's no thumb on the scale, right? Like, oh, what are cases that have to do with marriage? What are cases that have to do with this? So the broader your question is, then it doesn't know what you're looking for. So if I say, give me 3 examples of why George Washington's a great leader, if it only has 2, it's going to lie about the third one. But if I say, tell me about George Washington, you're in safer waters.
Mm-hmm. And so this actually forces you to strip out your own biases.
Yeah.
Which is one of the big meccas in leadership, is to try and strip out biases so you can have better strategic thinking or better leadership in general by stripping out those biases. So yeah, coming up with the first prompt that is not, as you say, thumb on the scale it's a bit of an art to doing that, I think. If you keep it broad and then you can narrow it in, is the general rule there, I'm guessing?
Yeah. So ChatGPT's worst area is research. If you're trying to write a paper and you go, oh, find me examples of this or find me examples of that, that's the worst thing you can use it for. However, if you wanted to teach about something, they say, oh, teach me about this battle. Teach me about this person. And you can even say, hey, I want you to be Stephen Hawking and teach me about string theory. Teach about this. And then you could ask questions. I did the same thing with the author of Save the Cat, asking questions about movies because I've always been interested in that. And it allows you to ask questions that, let's be honest, most screenwriters won't answer your questions, right? If they're good screenwriters, they're very hard to talk to. That's been my experience. So it allows you to ask questions from that person's data set. If you say, why does this happen or why does that happen? It gives you much better answers than if you ask kind of questions that might not know the answer to or that it can't find an answer to. And I discovered this because I asked a lot of questions and said, oh, give me the links to your sources. And I discovered all the links were fake. Yeah. Because I checked them. That's the thing. So as long as you don't go into the realm of where it's recent, it's something that like happened recently, or asking first where you'd say, oh, give me the link to it or show me the source. As long as you stay away from that, it's good. And in general, like it's just not great for research. That's the area where it's the weakest. It's so good at almost everything else. It's just not great at research yet.
Yeah, I think the link with Bing has a chance to improve that because it does actually cite sources or give you links to different sources. So that aspect, I think, is a start in the right direction. But yeah, you're right. You have to be careful with, and I've done a bit of researchy inquiry stuff with it. And I'm like, actually, I need to check that outside of chat to be sure that that's true. I was doing some research for my sci-fi novel. And I'm like, what happens to water when there's a container of water and then it gets exposed to a vacuum? What happens to it? So I put it into chat And it says, it boils dry. I'm like, what? Water boils in a vacuum? And I was like, no. So I had to go and research that. I'm like, oh yeah, it does. Okay, there you go. So that one, it was true, but there's other things where it's like the same thing. It just made up links to stuff that was rubbish. Okay. Any other mistakes that are worth mentioning?
Yeah, the most important mistake we kind of alluded to earlier is to start off with a specific prompt. So if you start off asking it questions, that's more correct. Like, oh, I want to figure out this. What information do I need to give you to give me that answer? That bypasses that, because a lot of people, they give it a bad prompt and get a bad response. They go, oh, I guess it doesn't work. And it's just like, it's anything. If you put in a bad equation into a calculator, you're going to get a bad response. So just moving away from starting with a command and starting instead with a question of saying, oh, what information do you need to help me do this? It becomes collaborative. And the second thing is that a lot of people are like shouting commands at it. But as soon as you switch to saying, oh, this is conversational, it removes the pressure. It's like the way most people, when they're talking to a computer, they look up, they're on a spaceship, right? We saw that on Star Trek, like computer. We all do that. Or we touch our ear because we think we're supposed to do that. We've seen it in so many movies. It's that same thing. We talk in a robot voice, like computer, please listen. Like, and it's not how we talk. So it allows you to stop doing that weird stuff if you just think of it conversationally.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is it's not short of ideas either. So when you're doing creative work, one of the things I've discovered too, which is really helpful, is that you can say, give me a list of 10 ideas for writing an article on blah. So I'll give you 10. And then if you look at them and go, meh, and you say, I want more than that. You say, give me 25 more non-obvious article titles. And then it'll just come up with these amazing stuff. And that's often where the non-obvious 25 extra is where the gold is. And that's the same principle when you're brainstorming with people. It's everybody has the first obvious answers and the first 10 replies. It's only when you keep pushing and pushing where the gold comes out. And it was interesting to see ChatGPT iterate like that too. Have you got any comments about using that kind of prompt, either the give me 25 more or giving me non-obvious answers?
Yeah, I think you're exactly on the right track. It's like when I was working on the title of this book or the title of an email, the title of anything, I don't need 50 good answers. I just need one that I can use. I don't care if the other are all bad. So asking for a lot of iterations. Sometimes I will ask it to do it in different styles. Like I'm like, oh, give me different headlines in the style of this copywriter, or give me different headlines in the style of this company. Like if I tell it to give me a title in the style of Harley Davidson, it's going to use a lot of it's going to say open road a lot. It's going to talk about sunsets. It's going to talk about like being American, like a lot, because that's what Harley Davidson talks about in their commercials. So it creates a different language. And then if I say, oh, you know what? Let's do it as Apple. Just by adding in a different company, it will completely change the language, because Apple always talks about the color white and futuristic and minimalism in all of its language. So an easy way to get different answers is just to throw in this different variable. And in the book, I include like 100 companies that it knows about, because what's hard is to get ChatGPT to tell you which companies it has the most data on. It won't do that if you ask that way. But if you say, like, who are the most well-known companies, then it will give you a list of who it has larger data sets on. And it's really interesting because it completely changes all of the answers. So that's another way to do it, is to just say, give me more creative ones, or you do it in this style. And you could try brands. You could do fictional people. Like I did a bunch with Rachel from Friends. And it's very interesting to see it uses that as a data set, which is different than if you say sound like Jennifer Aniston. It's a completely different data set, because nothing she said in Friends was her, right? It's all from a script. And that's a different character where she talks different in real life, of course, and any person does. So I've done a lot where I make it talk like John Wick, and everything is gray and it's always raining, right? And I think it's very similar if you say talk like Batman. So you choose any of these like black and white type characters, whereas if you say talk like Aquaman, it will be different. It'll be all fish metaphors. So that's the easiest way to activate ChatGPT's creativity. It's just by throwing in any real or non-real person or author or character, and you keep doing it, and then you'll just get one you like. It's like a really great way to get it to be creative without having to write complicated prompts. Yeah,
that is so much fun. As a creative, that's awesome. I'm thinking, talk in the style of Yoda. That would be really cool too. That's fantastic. All right. So 3 things that CEOs can do right now that can help them be better leaders, be more strategic. I'm reading off my canned question here because I want to make sure I keep this focus and not derail into the world of writing, which I'm also obsessed with. So what can leaders and CEOs do right now to help them be more strategic and more productive?
So the first thing is I would try to add in an automation that has ChatGPT or any AI tool like summarize and sort knowledge for you. So one of the greatest things I learned from one of my mentors who, when I was making nothing, I was living in my mom's basement. He was making millions of dollars a year. And he goes, I would pay 10 times more money for one piece of information on a napkin that I can use right now than a 1,000-page book full of nuggets. And it's like, it's really, that's the values, right? Most people read my book and maybe learn one thing that's really useful, and it'll be different, one thing for different people. So the faster you can get to that nugget. So I would say the first thing you can do is have it like summarize. Like, for example, most of us have someone we're following on YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever. It says, oh, every time this person posts, download the transcript of the video, summarize it, and put it in this folder for me or email it to me. So immediately it saves you all that time. That's one of the first ways to add more efficiency. The second way is to look at your tasks that are repetitive. What do you do that's a repetitive task? And look at, how can I make this more efficient? Is there a way that AI can help me with my email? Is there a way that AI can help me with my writing, help me to sort which are the more important emails? Because most email sorting algorithms aren't very good, right? They just put wrong stuff to the top, and having an AI in there will be more effective, and it allows you to be a little bit faster. So those are the first areas of efficiency. And then I would just say, spend a couple of hours playing around with ChatGPT once and go, oh, can it do this? Can it do that? With that mindset of, I wonder if it can do this. And you'll discover there's things that I haven't even thought of that are very useful to you. And it'll start to open up those doors. Like the most valuable thing about AI tools is that it lets you test ideas faster. It can let you create something, and if it works or doesn't work, you find out quickly rather than 6 months down the line, and you get like emotionally invested in a bad idea, which is what happens to so many people, right? We have an idea, we spend 6 months on it, we go, hasn't worked, I got to do 3 more months. Otherwise I have to admit we've wasted 6 months, right? Like that's why so many companies put way too much money. Remember for a while, there were all those 3D televisions and everything was made in 3D. I don't know anyone who ever was like, I want a 3D TV. Like if I'm watching TV with my kids, I don't want us all wearing helmets. But like they tried that, right? And then everyone's like, oh, everyone's going to want to do, what is it? The metaverse. And they spent hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, yeah, nobody wants that. Not enough people want that for it to be viable. So, and they spend huge amounts of money right on a bad idea. This allows you to find out if an idea is good or bad earlier. If it's good, you can double down quickly. And if it's bad, you can jump ship before you get emotionally invested. I had a bad idea talking to Debbie about something. I had an idea about Kindle short reads. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this is an opportunity. I wrote 3 and put them out the next day. It didn't work. My idea was a bad idea, but it didn't hurt my feelings because I didn't spend weeks or months on it. If I spent 3 weeks on it, then I'd be like, oh, I put in time. I got to put in more time to make this work. So it allowed me to bypass that emotional investment dangerous part.
I love it. Is there a specific plugin or app that you use to summarize and sort info into the emails like the way that you described?
There are so many plugins coming out constantly. A really cool one that I think is really good is there's one that now connects it with Google Sheets, and you can say chat with Sheets, it's called, I think. And you just say, here's the link to my Google Sheet. Let me ask you questions. And it can be a massive database. You can say, hey, what are the 3 biggest problems in here? Or what are the 3 like biggest aberrations? And you can start to have a conversation with it, because I am not good at writing like Excel codes and formulas. I hate that. Every time I need to do a formula, I have to look it up or have it write a formula for me. So you can remove that and say, oh, here's a huge piece of data, whether it's an email or a PDF or a spreadsheet of some kind. And you can say, ChatGPT, I want to talk with this document. There's another tool that's kind of coming out, which is you can take everything you've ever made, every time you've ever talked or recorded a video or written something, and that becomes a source of information. And you can create a chatbot that only uses questions you've answered in the past. So if someone asks a question, it goes, oh, and it answers on your behalf with something you said in the past. So that's something cool that's coming out that's kind of building more and more. And that's another way you can say, oh, this is the database to pull from to answer these questions.
And what's that name of that one?
ChatGPT can do that. They're building it out now where kind of you can do it yourself. And then there's I just never recommend the paid softwares right now, because most of them are just using the ChatGPT API. So you're just paying extra for someone to put, like someone showed me this really expensive tool for Google Sheets, and it was really complicated to install it. I was like, yeah, why would I do that when you can do it for free? Like, why would you add this extra layer? So a lot of the softwares out there they're not really necessary, because everything ChatGPT does is free. What you're paying for is using their server. So there's an open source version of ChatGPT that's already beaten ChatGPT 3.5 in every AI test. So free open source version is beating it. And there's a open source version that's chasing the paid version of ChatGPT that I pay for. So eventually these technologies are going to be so cheap and ubiquitous that it's going to be in your cell phone, and then it's going to be in your smartwatch. So I don't think we have to chase. And we're kind of in that time now where everyone's like launching every software suddenly has AI in the title. And it's like, you just don't need it. Every single image generator is using Stable Diffusion, which is a free piece of software. You can install it in your computer. So all of these tools that are very expensive, you always want to look at, did they actually invent something, or is their foundational source code something open source, which it often is. Now, the value of these tools, like the value of Midjourney, which I use a lot, is that they've built something on top of it and use their server instead of my own computer. So it's faster. That's a value to me. But just being aware of that, it really helps you to make better decisions. And there are constantly people releasing really amazing plugins for ChatGPT. They come out every day, which is why I can't tell you my favorites now, because it's changed since yesterday. It's happening that fast that every tool you can think of, there's a free version of it now. And that's kind of why this is like a really amazing time. And there's going to be a massive shift in the way we use computers and the way we use technologies, because it's a great equalizer. Now anyone can afford to use these tools because they're no longer very expensive.
It is true. And it also, I like your way of conceiving it as an equalizer. It's definitely an access accelerator for sure, so that people can have wisdom at their fingertips. You know, just like if you know how to interrogate it effectively, you can have so many great insights, so many great ideas that you can apply there, which is unreal. Now, Jonathan, are you ready for the Fast Five? Mm-hmm. Okay. What is the future technology you most want right now?
Text to video.
Yeah, me too, right? It's like, come on. That's got to be happening soonish. Can't happen sooner. All right. Number 2, best tip you ever got for leadership?
Your employees aren't your friends. Your employees aren't your family.
Oh, yeah. And what's the context for that?
Sure. When I first started hiring people, when I was doing really well, I was like, oh, you're a member of my family. I'll never fire you. This is a safe place. You're safe forever. And then they all stole from me. They would all lie about their time. And, you know, I learned that you have to separate your business from your personal relationships, because people don't. That's the same reason the military has like a big barrier between officers and enlisted, because otherwise, once you're friends with people, then they'll take advantage of you. It's the natural, it's human nature.
Oh, that's really sad and very true to point. Okay. What's one problem in the workplace you'd love to wave a magic wand and have be fixed right now?
Yeah, I think that there's become this huge merge of personal and professional life. Like every company now is like looking at what you're doing on Facebook, and everyone's looking at your politics or whatever, and all of this stuff that it didn't used to happen 10 or 20 years ago. Like, I don't know why it's a sudden thing where everything in your life affects how you work. I'd love to remove all that stuff where the workplace is just a place where you come to do work, and it doesn't really matter what people are doing outside of work, like what you do at home. Like, I don't care about, I only found out like anything about one of my employees' life when she was like, oh, I have to take the day off because I'm getting married. It's like, I don't care. I only care if you could do the job. I don't care where you're from, what you do, anything. So I want a world like that where we can just be judged on the quality of our work.
Lovely. Okay. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Who's a leader that's doing something right, and who's a leader, or if you want to, a leader who is doing something wrong or dodgy?
Oh boy, this is a hard one. I don't have a good answer because I'm trying to think about, is there any leader that I follow right now? I just think right now we're at a time where a lot of people are saying one thing and doing another. And there's kind of a lot of that. And I just kind of think that the thing I look for in leadership is someone who is consistent, and what they do is always true. Like, you always find out every time you find out this huge company, then you find these executives are doing something weird, or the money's disappearing, all of these things. And it's always this like one thing in public, one thing in private. Like every time you meet a politician, right, there's what they say when they're on the campaign trail and what they actually believe when they're like off stage. I think that's really the biggest problem, is that we have so much of that in every country. It's in every single country and everywhere in the world, is that we have this like pursuit of power for the sake of power. And I think that's like the problem.
I think, yeah, there's a book lurking in me around leadership and power. It's sort of percolating at the back of my brain. And I think that is a really useful observation. All right. Number 5, what is your favorite leadership book or podcast aside from this one?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot. This is a hard one. My favorite leadership book is Patton. It's 800 pages. I always talk about, no one ever reads biographies. That's the only biography I've read in the last 10 years. And it's what they based the movie on. And what's interesting about Patton is he was so bad at certain things. So after he won in Africa, they're like, oh, now you're the, like whatever you call the governor of this area. And they wanted him to be a political leader. And he was awful. He was so bad at that, but he was so good at winning. He was so good at winning that they, with his tank command, that they stopped giving him gasoline because he was so far ahead of the British. The British were still on their first day campaign. He was like about to take different cities. He took Paris. He was about to take Berlin. So they stopped giving him gasoline. And he was like, well, I'll just take gasoline from the people we conquer. And it was like unstoppable at this one thing. And it's good to see that someone can be bad at something and really good at one thing. And he was just really good at winning tank battles. Everything else, he had a lot of problems, and I think it humanizes him. But to see that someone who's like, they were like, you need to stop advancing. And he was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. He's like, I'm just going to take one more city tomorrow. And so they stopped sending him gas. And eventually, I think he took Berlin with one tank. He only had gas left for one of his tanks, and he kept winning. And I think that's really inspiring to see when someone finds the thing they're great at. And that's like my favorite leadership book.
That is so cool. I like your observation or distillation from the message. If there's one thing you're excellent at, keep doing that, because that's certainly your world. You know, you found writing and you haven't let up the gas on it. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. That was the Fast Five. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. See you there. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit more about your latest book, On the Tree of 300, ChatGPT for Profits. Anything else that's in the book that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with the audience?
It's really just designed to be a practical approach to saying, here's how you can use ChatGPT in a business environment to help you. That's the most important thing. And one of the things, I get this feedback about it that's like, oh, why did you include all the responses from ChatGPT? Every once in a while, I'm like, well, it's very hard to listen to half a conversation. So that's why it's a little bit longer than I want it to be. But it really helps to say, here's what I asked, here's the response. Here's what I asked, here's the response. So I try to be very authentic with that. Everything I use in the book is something that I've done over the last 6 months for practical purposes. I only replaced a few prompts that I reran just because it was like 6 months ago on a previous version of ChatGPT. So I just wanted to update it. But I try to be very authentic. And when I do that, I tell people, I say, oh, here's why I changed it in the footnotes. And that's very important to me. The main thing is to say, this is a practical manual of copy and paste prompts where you can go, oh, if I want to learn this skill, here's how to do it. If I want to learn coaching, if I want to learn how to do diet stuff, if I want to learn this and that, you can see me do it and then you can copy. It's really designed to make it very easy for you to understand this tool in the fastest way possible. I just think that there's a lot of information out there that's overwhelming, and I've tried to distill it down into here's what's useful. And that's really what it focuses on.
And I certainly found it extremely useful. And the way that you've showcased, as you mentioned, a bunch of different areas, everything from nutrition to personal training to writing, there's a whole broad swathe in there. It can, once you go through each of that and see the application in different contexts, you can extract the principles and apply it to the new context. And it was fantastic. So where can people find out more about you and your work?
Sure. If you Google Serve No Master, every single result is me. And if you want to find out more about my books on AI, it's just at servemaster.com/AI.
Fantastic. Jonathan, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for making time to come on the show. I really appreciate everything you put into this book and all the things that you shared with me specifically around writing. I really appreciate that too.
Thanks for having me.
So cool, right? Awesome. Well, takeaways are use the summarize and analyze function of ChatGPT. So take that first suggestion from Jonathan and work with it. Tip number 2 is play with ChatGPT. Use it to iterate and explore and ideate. I've used it for developing scenarios. I've used it for developing a schedule for my work, a whole bunch of different stuff, as well as for writing, of course. Number 3 is read Jonathan's book as a starting point. You can get some really fast traction on just following his model. And you can get his free extract of all the prompts that he used, which will just fast track everything. All right. So your tip of the day will come from The Olympus Project, my first sci-fi novel. And as we were talking about power, or Jonathan was talking about power and how leaders aren't being consistent because they're misusing power, I thought I'd just read a little excerpt from The Olympus Project, chapter 26 on page 182. It's a quote by Maya Garcia from her Terra Blanca journals. And she says, I fear that I misjudged the leader's ability to operate beyond early stages of development. Fear and power and pride remain primal forces that are, as yet, untamed. And still, I hope we can overcome our darker nature to let our better selves prevail. And I think that is the aspiration and hope I have for leaders as well. We will all wrestle with power at some stage in some function, either being on the receiving end of power wielded badly or power being wielded well, or if we get gifted power, hopefully that we wield it with wisdom and compassion. So let's do that. Next up on the show, we have Catherine Lazaruk, and this is a really interesting conversation. And her premise is executive presence is dead. So we have quite a controversial chat about what that all means. So that's what's coming up next. In the meantime, we are still in July, and my special opportunity is still out there for you. If you would like to listen to the audiobook version of The Olympus Project, if I still have some codes left, all you have to do is tweet about the show, tweet or post on any of the social medias, tag me in it. And if I don't come back to you straight away with the code for the audiobook, prompt me by email, zoe@zoerouth.com. Let me know that you did post about the show, and I will send you a code and you can get the book, the audiobook, for free. All right. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.